and liberal, he can participate. Now, we've gone one step further. What we have said is that we are going to get an outside agency to make sure that these two rules are followed. So the people who ensure that no criminals get into our system or no fundamentalists get into our system is an NGO run by Mr. Lyngdoh. You must have heard of Mr. Lyngdoh, a very upright, strong officer. And these are the gentlemen who ensure that our elections are free and fair and the right type of people can come into our system. I personally do not accept an election until they sign off on the election. Other than that, there are a set of rules and procedures that we have which ensure the type of control that you're talking about. But what we are saying is, if you want to have a youth organization, there are many youth organizations in this country. The voice of the youth has to be in that organization. And the only way for the voice of the youth to be in that organization is if they elect their leaders. You know, if I was to come into this room and say, okay, what's your name? No, yours, yeah. Sorry, Ahmed Faraz. If I was to come in and say, now, Ahmed is your college president, what would you think about that? Would you like that? No? That's what all political parties are doing to you. Every single political party is following that procedure, nomination procedure. Someone comes in and says, Ahmed is going to be president, and everybody says yes. You're not ready to accept it in your college. Why do you accept it in your country? Right? That is the fundamental change that we are trying to make. And there are thousands of us now who are doing this in the Youth Congress. We're having an election in Tamil Nadu. 1.5 new members have joined the Youth Congress. And 500 to 600 youngsters like yourselves are ensuring that this election takes place. So it's a very, very powerful thing. And we're going to have the whole country done 1 year from today as far as the Youth Congress and NSUI is concerned. So anybody, Ahmed himself, can come and participate in this process and be part of choosing the leaders of the Youth Congress. So that is the idea behind the process. But I want you to think about this. You know, I said if I was to come here and I was to say Ahmed is your president, you don't appreciate it and you won't accept it. Why do you accept it at the national level? Why don't you say something about it? Why don't you say, listen, this non-democratic structure of political parties is not acceptable? You should think about that.
A very good morning to you, Mr. Rahul Gandhi. My name is Iram Khan and I'm a student of BLB third year. My question to you is that recently it is in the light of stripping of Aligarh Muslim University's minority character, and with it the Muslim reservation has been taken away by the university, and it actually amounts to a cold-blooded murder of the Muslim education in India. So as a promising leader, we all have great expectations from you. So I would like to know as to what your government is doing in the regard of giving back the minority character to Aligarh Muslim University and further upgradation of this seat of learning.
See, you said that this is a center of Muslim intellectual growth, intellectualism, education. It is that. It is a fact that Aligarh is a center of Muslim education. But it's actually much more than that. It is a center, to me, it's a center at the global level. And it goes beyond, it's an international level thing, okay? So let's not, I went to Egypt some time back, and the students there mentioned your university. Right? So it is a historical place, and in a sense, it is an intellectual treasure for our country. There are issues with minority institutions here, And I will go back and I will discuss this issue with the Prime Minister and others at the highest level of government.
Good morning. Myself, Athar Ali. I'm pursuing MBA final year. My question is that few years back you said that whenever central government or any government sanction the fund for the welfare of the society, only 10 paisa out of 1 rupee reach to them, right? So my question is that now it's the government of UPA. So I want to ask that how much gap has been filled by the UPA government in this 1 rupee and 10 paisa, and what's your expectation from the youth that how can we play this significant role in this segment?
I'll speak a bit wider than your question, okay? When we started 60 years ago, there was one India, and it was a poor India. When all of us Indians fought for our independence, there were no rich people in that fight. It was a poor country. Today, 60 years after independence, there are two Indias. One India is a progressive, rich, fast-moving India, and the other India is a poor, slow-moving India without opportunity. And the central challenge for all of us, you, me, everybody, all the youngsters of this country, is to once again make one India. Now, if you looked 30 or 40 years ago, the central problem that we faced as a government was we did not actually have enough money to do a lot of the things that we wanted to do. Today, that problem doesn't exist anymore. Today, there is no shortage of money. Today, the main problem is how to get that money to the end user, to the last person who needs it. The poorest person, the student, the weakest person. That is the central challenge. And that's the point you've raised, which is 15 paisa or 10 paisa of every rupee reaches the poor, or reaches where it should reach. There are 2 or 3 reasons for that. There is a central government, state government issue. So for example, as a central government, we can send funds to Uttar Pradesh. We cannot implement anything in Uttar Pradesh. If you ask us to build roads in Uttar Pradesh, we cannot do it. If you ask us to look into electricity in Uttar Pradesh, we cannot do it. So in a sense, there is a state-center division that needs to be bridged. Most of you know my views on the Uttar Pradesh government and its ability to carry out reform, ability to develop the state. So that's one issue. Second issue is an issue of identification. If you go into a poor village, we actually do not know who the people are. We don't have an identification system. Rich people in this country or well-off people in this country have an identification system. Everybody knows them. You know, if I ask, do you have an ID in your pocket? Yes. Are you a student of AMU? Yes. Everybody knows how to recognize you. Nobody knows how to recognize a poor person. If you go to a village and you look at the BPL list, it's all wrong. So there is an identification problem. And the biggest step that we've taken on this is what Mr. Nilekani is trying to do. What Mr. Nilekani is trying to do is create an ID for every single Indian. Rich, poor, whichever, regardless of which state he comes from, which religion, which caste, one ID for one person, directly linked to that person. So that will have a massive impact on our ability to make funds reach the poor. The third thing is participation of people in politics. What I was saying about non-democratic party structures. If you go to South India, where there is tremendous participation of people in politics, women in politics in particular, and I point that out for the women in this room,